The man standing outside the window, it was about 11:30 at night. Sarah, 27, living in a small town in America, was sitting alone in her house. The cold winter wind was blowing outside, and the entire neighborhood was immersed in silence. Sarah was working on her laptop with a mug of coffee. She was a freelance writer and often stayed up late writing stories. But something was different that night. The silence of the room repeatedly gave her a strange feeling, as if someone was watching her. She shook her head and controlled herself, and thought that maybe it was her own exhaustion. But her heart started beating faster. Suddenly, she felt as if a shadow had moved on the other side of the window glass. She straightened up in shock and looked out the window. Only her own reflection was visible in the darkness, but her heart was still telling her that someone was there. Sarah turned on the light so that she could see clearly outside. But as soon as the light spread into the room, the marks of a hand became clearly visible on the window glass amidst the moisture. The marks were from outside, as if someone had placed their palm firmly on the glass and breathed. Her heart skipped a beat. The house was completely closed, and behind it was a small lawn, beyond which the forest began. No one would go there at night. Sarah plucked up the courage to close the curtain and began to entertain herself. But not even a few minutes had passed when she heard a faint sound from outside the window again, as if someone was scratching the glass. Chirr, chirr, chirr. The sound was heartbreaking. Sarah's hands began to tremble. She immediately thought of calling the police, but the mobile slipped from her hand due to fear. At the same time, a blurry shadow suddenly began to move behind the curtain. Someone was standing behind the curtain. Sarah's breath went dry. She started to back away slowly, with a pounding heart. She remembered that her father had kept an old wooden stick at the back of the house. Maybe that would be useful. She walked towards the storeroom with her feet pressed against it. But as she walked, her steps stopped. Two eyes were now clearly visible on the window glass. Behind the white glass, two eyes peering into the darkness, staring straight at Sarah. Sarah screamed. She immediately picked up the stick and ran to the window. But as soon as she pulled the curtain, there was nothing outside. Only the silent snow spread across the lawn and the rustling of the wind. She called the police with trembling hands. When the police arrived, they made a circuit of the house. The footprints of a person were clearly visible in the snow, which had reached the window. But the most terrifying thing was that those footprints did not go back. They had only reached the window. And then, as if that person, that thing, had disappeared into the ground right there. Sarah still shudders when she remembers that night, because many times after that, in the darkness of the night, she feels like someone is standing behind the window curtain, silently watching her. It was nighttime when the knock came on the door. David, 30, had just finished his shift. He worked the night shift at a gas station and, as usual, was returning home around 3 a.m. His home was on a deserted road some distance from the city, where only a few old houses stood. David arrived home exhausted and went straight to his bedroom and lay down on the bed. He had barely closed his eyes when there was a light knock on the door. Tick-tock. He raised his head in surprise. Who could be coming so late at night? He slowly got up, went to the door, and peeked out through the crack. There was no one outside. David locked the door and returned. But as soon as he lay down on the bed, the same knock was heard again. Tick-tock, this time louder than before. His heart started beating faster. He thought maybe someone was doing something naughty. But when he went to the window, a shiver ran down his spine. The entire corridor outside was empty, covered in snow, and there were not even any human footprints. He returned to bed, but was already asleep. A few minutes later, there was another knock on the door, but this time it was accompanied by a voice. Faint but clear. Open the door. I know you're awake. David's hands and feet went cold. The voice was not that of an adult, but of a child. But what was that child doing outside in the snowstorm at 3 in the morning? He mustered up the courage and said loudly, "Who is it?" There was silence for a few moments. Then the same childlike voice came. "I'm lost. Let me in." David broke out in a sweat. His mind was screaming that this was not normal. He picked up the phone to call the police, but the network was suddenly down. There was no sign of a signal. At that moment, he looked at the window. Behind the curtain stood a small shadow, as if a child was standing with its head bowed by the window. But his height, his shadow, seemed strangely long and twisted. David's heart began to beat loudly. He immediately turned off all the lights and hid in the corner of the room. But the knocking did not stop. Now she was constantly, madly knocking on the door. Tick-tock. The sound suddenly stopped. The room was silent as a tomb. David thought that maybe the thing had gone. But when he dared to look under the door, his eyes were wide open. A shadow was moving on the floor under the door. Someone was still standing there. Then at that moment, a small hand began to penetrate from under the door. A hand, but not a human hand. Long, bony fingers and nails as sharp as daggers. David screamed in fear and pushed the door in with all his strength. His heart was trembling, but he held the door until the presence outside was completely silent. When the police arrived a long time later, there were no footprints on the snow outside. The only thing was that there were long scratch marks on the door from top to bottom, as if someone had scratched the wood with their claws. David still says that he knows only one thing. Whoever it was not human, and he remembers the same voice over and over again. Open the door. I know you're awake. Emily lived in a large city in America. She was a 25-year-old university student and often studied late at night. Her apartment was on the 6th floor. The city lights looked beautiful from above, and she often sat by the window and studied. But one night, as the clock struck 2, Emily felt something moving across the window. There should have been nothing outside on the 6th floor. No balcony, no path. But still, it was as if a shadow had passed across the glass. Emily rubbed her eyes and thought it was her imagination. But a few moments later, she saw clearly. 2 eyes were peering through the window glass. She jumped back in shock. Her mind immediately told her that this was impossible. No human could be hanging in front of the window on the 6th floor. But the eyes were there, staring straight at her. Emily's heart sank into her throat. She pulled the curtains with trembling hands and turned off the room's light. But even in the darkness, it felt like someone was constantly outside. After a while, there was a light knock on the window. Tick-tock, Emily's breathing stopped. She slowly hid in the corner. But then the sound started to get louder. Tick-tock. She plucked up the courage and turned on the light from her mobile phone. As soon as the light fell on the window, there was a face. Long, bony, and eyes shining red in the darkness. That face was so close to the glass, as if it was stubbornly refusing to come in. Emily tried to scream, but the sound got stuck in her throat. Suddenly, that face disappeared. But after that night, this series became a daily routine. Every time it was 2 in the morning, the same eyes started appearing at the window. Sometimes a knock, sometimes a whisper, sometimes the scratching of something's nails on the glass, Emily told the building's guards. But everyone said it was impossible for anything to come out on the 6th floor. The police came and looked, but there was no sign. Now Emily says that the thing doesn't just stop at the window, but sometimes she feels like it's even inside the apartment. Because in the dark of night, she feels the same red eyes peeking near her bed. If you liked this true and scary story, then be sure to subscribe to our channel, Cursed Narratives, to hear more scary stories. Your subscription encourages us to bring more such spine-chilling horror stories.